Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept Study, book by Neely Fuller Jr. We're covering Area 9, War/Counter-War, pages 381 to 389. And just as a sort of refresher to the concept we're talking about here, which is maximum emergency compensatory action. For further details and what that means, you can refer to the last video or stay tuned for this discussion. But I'm just going to read something from 380 because I think it's a really nice refresher to the concept we'll be discussing today. So the code says, when someone says or implies that there is no justifiable reason for the concept or the enactment of maximum emergency compensatory action, say the following: as long as the killing of people by people can be justified for some reasons, maximum emergency compensatory action can be justified for one reason. The reason for the existence of the concept of maximum emergency compensatory action is justified by the existence of the system of white supremacy racism. So I think it's really constructive to have that in mind when talking about this concept, because it's really easy of course, it's really easy to paint a sort of concept like this as something being incorrect because it involves killing. But as we have been learning, this is the most honest and justifiable form of killing that can take place while a system of racism exists. So that being said, does anyone have any thoughts, notes they wanted to share from this portion of the text before we read about we read about suicide?
The only thing I have, that I have, it's not really a note, it's mainly just a comment, is as I'm reading through this section, even from last week, and I'm learning more about like just what it is and what it means, like maximum emergency compensatory action. Because I was a little confused at the beginning, but as we continue to discuss, it's starting to make sense. And I think like as we talk about the suicide section too, it would make a little bit more sense. But the portion you just read, and it almost makes me want to go back and start thinking about like, okay, so who could be identified as this? Who could be identified as this? Because I don't keep up to date. I don't know many people, but you mentioned a few last week. So I'm just continuing to unpack this concept and seeing like who has already done this like previously. But it's the same as my same thoughts as last week. Don't have many thoughts about this other than still learning and still trying to fully understand it entirely. Thank you.
Yeah, and this portion is really constructive because we get like parameters, more parameters of what exactly is maximum emergency compensatory action. And I think from the victims mentioned last week, the only correct representation of an act of maximum emergency compensatory action, which I'm going to begin calling MECCA, is Omar Thornton, because I don't believe he killed any non-white people. He only killed suspected racists or white supremacists, and he took his own. He ended his own existence, which is two really important. Well, some really important parameters around this concept. So yeah. So
Yeah, I wanted to add to what Nana was saying. I felt like after reading this, the concept of Mecca started becoming a little bit more clear. Last week, I had said that, Mecca, the reason why Mecca is necessary or even exists is because of the system of racism, white supremacy, and its existence. Reading more into it, I understand, kind of the guidelines or what actually makes an incident count as Mecca. I also understand, why someone like Neely Fuller doesn't really talk about Mecca, because it's something that can be misinterpreted very easily. Because when you start talking about killing people, everyone knows that killing's bad and it shouldn't be done. But Mecca's talking about compensation, so I think it's very easy to misinterpret that when you're talking about Mecca. Yeah, that's what I wanted to add so far. Um, yeah.
agreed, totally. Thanks for sharing, Mr. Kwaku. Mm. Okay, so I'm going. I think this aspect, this concept, or perhaps this truth around life, suicide, and existence. To me, it makes a lot of sense because I've always have seen like the existence of people as even before even when I was more confused, I always was aware of the like immense misery that people are living in. So I knew that these creatures called people were not valuable, or not were not valued by whatever was controlling all of this and the root of all of this. And then many years later, I'm introduced to the code and the concept of not of life and existence and non-life. And we definitely live in a system where life does not exist, because there can be it's even hard for me to put it in my own words. It is so perhaps we will read it first and then talk about it. So I'm going to read from 381. Um, and then for folks following along, when I stop, if you could take over, that would be very helpful. So again, it's on page 381, and the code says, question, is a person who enacts maximum emergency compensatory action committing suicide? Answer, yes. As long as racism and white supremacy exists, any reaction to any reaction to its existence by a non-white person can be considered a form of suicide. When a non-white person submits to white supremacy, that non-white person can be said to be submitting to a suicidal condition. To submit to and or cooperate with racism and white supremacy can be called a prolonged suicidal process. To submit to and or cooperate with people who are extremely powerful in the practice of injustice and who are greatly committed to continuing to practice it can be called a commitment to the prohibition of justice. This could be called, in effect, the prohibition of the birth of justice. To prevent the establishment of justice and or to fail to resist the practice of injustice, even to the death, is to endorse the suicide of the basis for the meaning of life, as it should exist among the people of the known universe. Any existence that directly or indirectly supports non-justice and or incorrectness is in essence the functional equivalent of non-life, no life at all.
Life in total essence is the sum total of truth, justice, and correctness, which equals peace. Those people who exist in subjugation to white supremacy, non-white people, exist in support of falsehood, non-justice, and incorrectness. Therefore, they neither live a life nor support a life, but rather exist in non-life and support non-life. To exist in non-life and support non-life, regardless of time and effort spent in so doing, is to commit suicide. From this viewpoint, a victim of white supremacy who enacts maximum emergency compensatory action is not committing suicide, but is acting as a force in support of the future establishment of life against the masterful force that now does the most to maintain a greatly sophisticated non-life, white supremacy. Without justice, there is no life in people. Without justice, people do not live, they only exist. People who willfully and deliberately insist on practicing injustice and who do so on a masterful scale over a prolonged period of time and who show no intention of stopping the practice do not deserve to exist. The non-white people who submit to those who practice injustice on a masterful scale over a prolonged period of time do not do their duty to the meaning of life if they continue to exist in subjugation to the masterfully unjust. To refuse to submit to such subjugation by eliminating their own existence while eliminating the existence of one or more unjust masters under conditions of maximum emergency compensatory action is to promote the production of justice. It is not a matter of choosing between life and suicide. It is a matter of choosing between justice and non-justice. Existence without justice is non-life. All existence has a value, but the value of existence under conditions dominated by non-justice is in the will to utilize that existence to the utmost to eliminate injustice and to establish justice.
Yeah, I thought this part was really profound to say the least, because it makes a lot of sense, and I could totally understand the counter racist rationale for not making it about living slash life slash suicide, but making it as a decision to no longer exist in the system of white supremacy and a serious effort to promote and establish a system of justice and to produce life, which is very, very I hate to use the word, but very, very powerful sentiments, very powerful portions, passage, this entire part. So yeah, as victims of racism, a lot of us are definitely choosing the slow suicide route by not resisting the system, by changing their thought, speech, and action. Um, but the effective number will be reached.
One of the parts that stood out to me in that section was the reinforcement or the continuous saying, like, it's not about anything. The only thing that matters in the situation is replacing the system of racism, white supremacy with justice. So it's almost like it kind of reminds me when people are arguing, like for context, I'm gonna say someone like who's non-white is arguing with someone who's white, but someone who's non-white maybe did an action that was just incorrect, but they're justifying it by, well, you committed this like racist attack, and it's almost like your action is still not justified because incorrectness or mistreatment is a mistreatment regardless. So it's just very interesting as I think about this. I just see these like discussions happening, like playing back in my head, and people are just going back and forth about like who can like one up each other and mistreating. Very interesting. And also like that, what was it? I remember it was I can't remember what article it was, but there was an article in the chat, and it was just like I went through the comment section, and it was just so bad. I was just like, oh my gosh, it's just people just bashing each other, and it's just like, how are you, like, obviously they're not in the mindset of replacing the system of racism, white supremacy with justice. It's more of just like, we need to get there though. I think we all need to like transform our minds to get there, and I think this does a great job. And also, if someone didn't understand what Mecca meant, would be clapping like, oh yeah, you did something great. But in the eyes of like justice, it's like killing someone is incorrect, like the action itself. Therefore, you have to kill yourself if you decide to do that action. Interesting.
Yeah, it's a very serious decision for a victim to make if they choose to attempt to use this concept. And Neely Fuller definitely stresses the importance of this being not a sport, not for glory, not for fun, but a very serious concept that should be thought out very carefully. And one should talk to the creator before attempting to apply this concept. And yeah, I really appreciate this part from this suicide slash Mecca passage, and it says people who willfully and deliberately insist on practicing injustice and who do so on a masterful scale over a prolonged period of time and who show no intention of stopping the practice do not deserve to exist. And yeah, I think that's really significant, and I would add that this should probably be applied to all people, not just suspected racists, but any person who for some reason cannot change their thought, speech, and behavior to attempt to produce a system of justice, reconsider like, why do they exist? Like, why am I on this planet? Is it merely to be a conflict creating creature, or a heavily victimized creature for forever? I don't think so, but I may be incorrect. I thought this part was also very important from 382, where the code says, question, what is the best and correct thing to say about the concept and the enactment of maximum emergency compensatory action? Answer, both the concept and the enactment of maximum emergency compensatory action is at best a tragic necessity. So, without the system of racism, white supremacy, we won't have to attempt to practice such concepts that result in the loss of life, and such insane concepts as well, because this is a very insane concept to say the least. But as the code says, this is one of the most honest and correct ways to go about attempting to produce justice if we can no longer bear being a victim of racism and white supremacy.
Yeah, I had to really think about, that part about, being very honest. Because I think in the moment, or not in the moment, but when you really think about it, I think most people, they think about like, this is the only way that, in some cases justice can be achieved, in the most efficient way. the only way that we can get attention, bring attention towards it, or for whatever reason. So when he was kind of talking about, when he kind of mentioned like it being like the most honest, you know, enactment or action, I really had to like think about that, because it's you know, it's kind of insane to say, you know, that the system's insane, you know, justified insanity. And you know, because of the system of racism, white supremacy, that is why Mecca is necessary and why it's needed.
Yes, sir. Miss B, I saw you had a hand raised.
Yes, I just wanted to read one little section over again. Without justice, there is no life in people. Without justice, people do not live, they only exist. And that reminds me of before learning the code, how I was just surviving. I used to always use the term, oh, I'm just surviving. I'm not living, I'm just surviving. And I'm not sure if anybody else have felt that way. And so when reading the book and learning the code, it gave me purpose. This book gave me Neely Fuller and Dr. Francis Cress Wilson. They gave me purpose in life. And yeah, I just want to say like how thankful and grateful I am to the both of them and this book. And I don't feel like I'm just living anymore. I'm like I'm just surviving. You know, I'm more than that now because I have a purpose, and that is to learn about racism, white supremacy, and to hopefully eliminate it, to figure out a way to eliminate it, to end it. That's all.
Yeah, exactly the same. The discovering my cosmic responsibility from the ISIS papers and reading the code as well, especially this portion. I've always felt like a person who has rarely ever felt alive, and once I develop a purpose, understanding my cosmic responsibility allowed me to really refine the way I was trying to fulfill my purpose of fighting trauma. But the best way to fight trauma is to eliminate the system of white supremacy. So yes, and I'm sure there's many of non-white people, especially Black people, walking around thinking the same exact way, feeling like they're just as surviving. Because I used to feel like I just existed with no human emotions. I felt very much like a robot that just went about my day very detached from the world. But understanding the code and racism and white supremacy has definitely allowed me to also feel like I have a purpose, a responsibility, and a duty. Mr. Ray, would you like to chime in?
Yes, I just wanted to add on that I too felt as if I was just existing before I learned about the code. I can also admit that I also had a high lack of self-awareness. But since learning about the existence of the code and attempting to carry it out as best as I can, honestly, I can say as a Black male, this is the most masculine, truly masculine that I've ever felt in my existence. And I suspect as long as I stay on my cosmic assignment, that will magnify and continue. I'm thinking about the three questions Dr. Wellsing told us to ask, you know, who are you, where are you, and what time is it? And it's just pretty hard to deny what's going on, what time it is, and what we need to be doing as Black people to establish justice. Yeah, I'll mute my line.
Well said. I totally agree. So I thought this So on page 384, there's a ton of bullet points of maximum emergency compensatory action is not a sport, and there's a bunch of do nots, the do's and don'ts of the concept. I'm only gonna read one. For the folks who may be listening, I suggest, highly suggest ordering your copy of the code and begin practicing CRWS code. But I'm gonna read the bullet point at the bottom of 384, which the code says, do not enact maximum emergency compensatory action under any circumstance where a non-white person may be killed, injured, or have his or her possessions destroyed or damaged as a direct and simultaneous result of your act. So when a person is wanting to understand, like, was this an act of a Mecca, that's a really telltale sign, is if a non-white person was harmed during that act, then it is not Mecca. So a lot of the folks mentioned last week were not, like Chris Dorner and Mr. Cosmos and Santapera. Those were not Meccas because they either did not end their own existence or they harmed a non-white person in the process of killing white people. So, and just to, I think this portion also demonstrates how serious this concept is, and I think this should be just put out in the airwaves. This is from 385, which states, do not enact maximum emergency compensatory action unless you are absolutely certain that there is nothing more important than the elimination of injustice. Under the circumstances of every part of your existence, it is the correct thing to do. There's nothing else that you can do during the remainder of your existence that is likely to be more effective in helping to eliminate injustice. You have a set, definite time limit for the completion of the enactment. You believe that to exist without justice is worse than death, non-existence. So especially the last one really hits home, because living in a system of white supremacy, it definitely is worse than death, because well, myself, I think it's worse than death because I have to literally wake up and just see the total misery of non-white people, especially Black people across the globe. And it's very incorrect that it's so in our faces, just the total destruction of Black people, total mutilation of our character and our bodies, minds, 24/7. And for this to be going on and there to be such little attention on it is an insult to my existence and every single Black person and non-white person existence, to say the least. So I think it's worse than death. It's one of the worst things. It's one of the worst kinds of existence that has probably occurred in the universe. But I may be incorrect. But from my understanding of what's happening, I think it's one of the worst experiences a individual can have, is being a victim of racism, white supremacy. Folks who have, Mr.
I have a
John.
question. Oh, never mind. Go down.
All right. I have a note I'd like to add on page 385 and 386. How you mentioned on the previously that Mecca is not a sport. You know, when it comes to sports and stuff, you know, they get canceled if the conditions and stuff aren't right. On like 385, it says at the very bottom of the page, do not enact maximum emergency compensatory action unless the overall conditions are supportive of an enactment that is extremely effective. Some examples of factors to be considered are as follows: ice, darkness, cold weather, snow, light, hot weather, rain, congestion. And then on the next page on 386, do not enact maximum emergency compensatory action during periods of great destruction caused by natural forces, God, the creator, Allah, etc. Examples include disease, epidemic, earthquake, hurricane, firestorm, tornado, famine, flood, ice, snow, volcanic eruptions. And then it also goes on to state, avoid speaking and or acting against racist man and racist woman, white supremacists collectively during those periods when great fear and or destruction is being produced by all power, the source, the great spirit, God, the Almighty, the creator, Allah, Jehovah, etc. And I really like those points because again, if you think of it as a sport, sports get canceled when the conditions aren't right. And I think that that's a good example or in reference to Mecca on 385 and 386.
Yeah, definitely really important part of the code, and definitely a part of the code that demonstrates that this code is just geared towards correctness and doing things, just doing what should be done to produce a system of justice. So it's to a correct thinking person should be able to see this text as a very constructive tool instead of some sort of hate book or hate white people book or something that it is often painted as. So I'm like to read this part from the code as well. Is it? Oh yeah, this is from 387. Again, it's again it stresses we're gonna get to your question. Alexa Cruz, I'm sorry, I forgot that you had a question. You like to share that question and then
Yeah,
Ray?
before you move on. And one of the bullet points in the beginning of 385 says do not enact maximum emergency compensatory action against any white person whom you have reason to believe is doing all that he or she can to stop practicing racism and are doing all that he or she can to stop others from doing the same. I feel like that's kind of tricky because, you know, white people are so codified and they kind of like make you feel that that's what they're doing. But in reality, that's not what they're doing. They're quick to refine white supremacy by hiding so much. So it's kind of like a you'll never know situation until it's like you never really know. But it's like, can you trust white people? Can you trust them to actually not be practicing white supremacy in order to carry out Mecca if that was your last option? So that bullet point was kind of tricky for me because it's like they're majority of them are racist white suspects, and we won't really know if we can trust them to actually not practice white supremacy.
Yeah, for me, eh, it's it's very easy for me to tell if a white person is well, I would just ask the white person, what are you doing to eliminate the system of white supremacy? And the majority, no white person that I'm aware of is spending the majority of their time and energy to replace the system. So this may fall into the area of liking or disliking certain white people because it's most white people are not attempting to produce a system of justice. So so that to me that pretty much leads puts every white person on the table as a suspected white supremacist besides babies and people who are senile. So yeah, to avoid confusion on if the person is practicing racism, just observe that white person, and do you see that white person, or does that victim see that white person talking about racism, white supremacy, using words that produce truth and correctness, or are they a white person that still uses code words and still has to say stuff like African American, or low income, or disadvantaged people, or like marginalized groups? If they're still using that kind of language, then that should be a indication that they are still practicing racism in a form of deceit. If other folks would like to chime in on a question, if not, or Ray, you could also share.
Oh, I had a hand up to read, but
Oh, please
I
do.
would like, I would like to add really quick, back to when you all were discussing maximum emergency compensatory action is not a sport. And it's interesting that Mr. Fuller used that language. I'm looking at the online etymology of the word sport, and it says to take pleasure, to amuse oneself, to divert, amuse, please, play, to seek amusement, literally carry away the mind from serious matters. So that was Mr. Fuller using language with precision as to why they shouldn't be taken as a sport. So I just wanted to add that.
Oh, that definition is really significant, especially how, given to how the system of white supremacy functions. It functions by none of us being focused on it at all. So wow, thanks for sharing. I definitely learned from that. Any
Okay,
folks? Oh, go ahead.
I didn't know if you wanted me to continue reading.
Oh yeah, please do.
All right, I'll continue from where Dan left off on page 386. Explanation. It is correct for all people to admit that they do not know everything there is to be known, or that they know the reasons for everything that happens in the known universe. It is correct for people to always be willing to do whatever is the most humane thing to do in every circumstance. Therefore, when the powers of the known and unknown, God, the source, Allah, the Great Spirit, etc., seem to be directly inflicting great misery on racist man and racist woman, it is incorrect for the victims of racism, non-white people, to rejoice or applaud. It is correct for all to do that which is constructive and humanely helpful. It is correct to be as constructively helpful as you can when there are people nearby who are suffering from disastrous incidents. It is correct for a person to believe that if placed near a tragic incident by all power, God, the source, Allah, etc., it is also correct for that person to believe that he or she was placed there to be of the most constructive help to whomever is suffering. Compensatory law, the law of laws, requires that when people are made helpless by that force or power that is greater than all of the people of the known universe, all power, God, Jehovah, Allah, the creator, etc., it is the duty of all people to do all that they can to help those who are most in need of constructive help. During this period, the people who have been abused the most, non-white people, should try to do the most to help all others. It is unjust and incorrect for a victim of racism to commit any act against any person when that person is being injured or being killed by natural forces, or when that person is experiencing suffering as a result of these forces. It is just and correct for all people to try to help eliminate suffering during periods of famine, flood, epidemic, etc. I didn't know if anyone wanted to stop and converse on that portion.
Oh, yeah, the part I wanted to read as a group was the suicide part. We covered it already, but I do appreciate you reading that portion for just to add to the evidence of how correct thinking this code attempts to allow victims to be, and always gearing our mindset to do the correct things and at the correct times, because in moments of emergencies, natural disasters, we should not be attempting to practice counter war, counter violence, or mecca against suspected racists. We should be attempting to give constructive help. But again, the code is this entire concept is every piece of it is something that the individual victim has to decide to or not. So yeah, some people may definitely disagree with this. For the folks who wanted to comment or share some notes.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I felt this part too. I also another part where I had to think a little bit. So like, why exactly is it like not okay to enact Mecca during such an event? And it's kind of like what you were saying, O5. You know, should be providing constructive help during that time. You know, Mecca, that requires a lot of planning, a lot of and time and energy. So during periods of like famine, pandemics, etc., that time and energy should be used towards constructive means, providing constructive help to those that need it the most. Yeah, I just wanted to add that part.
Thank you. And also, I forgot to mention earlier and this part that we covered, page 381, the code states, question, is it correct for a non-white female to enact maximum emergency compensatory action? And the short answer I am going to give is just yes. The code says yes. So even non-white females, if the circumstances permit, have to commit Mecca, then they should also they also have that that duty. So this part right here from 387 is another piece that emphasizes the seriousness of maximum emergency compensatory action. The code states, before a victim decides to enact maximum emergency compensatory action, it is very important that the powers of the known and unknown, God, the creator, Allah, etc., be recognized, and that the person who decides to enact maximum emergency compensatory action be convinced of the basis of reason, logic, and faith that the powers of the known and unknown has clearly indicated that the enactment of maximum emergency compensatory action is correct for the time, place, and circumstance. Very, very important. I of course can't imagine what that looks like, but it must be a profound experience to have such clarity when attempting to apply this sort of concept, and be that in communication with the forces of the universe and or the creator. Other folks that wanted to share some notes or read from the text, something they may have highlighted.
This kind of goes back into the planning once again with Mecca. I thought it was really important how Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Talked about kind of like the frame of mind you should be in when enacting MECA or considering MECA. 383, he talks about it should be planned. It should be planned, and it shouldn't be enacted on a whim. It should not be thought of as an adventure. It should not be thought of as a way of expressing anger. It should not be thought of as a way of testing skills or as a game. The serious and final decision should not be made in haste. It should not be made in anger. It should not be enacted because you merely feel bitter or upset about racism, and or because you feel disgruntled at parts of your existence. So, like, you know, with that in mind, it kind of makes me think, you know, the people who may have enacted MECA, was this kind of like their motivation, or or they just, you know, other more victims, confused victims, you know, just upset and, you know, trying to compensate in their own way. But I think in order for it to count as MECA, you know, these things should be taken into consideration. I think when you are about to enact MECA, a lot needs to be done, and it should be taken very seriously. I don't think I think that those individuals who may have these, and what I'm saying is a complete assumption, but those individuals who enacted MECA, I think that they definitely would have thought about it and pondered on it for a while before they did before they did do what they did. But I think it's just important not that these don't, you know, merely come out as, you know, acts of hate or acts of feeling bitter, because I think when if the purpose is ever revealed, that would, you know, destroy the legacy or cause confusion. Rather than it being seen as an act of compensation, it'll be seen as an act of, you know, of just a victim who is upset about their conditions, and rather than working towards them, they just decide to, you know, blow everyone's brains out, something along those lines. Hope that made sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Remember, if the basic requirements are not met involving MECA, then the act was, and this is from 380, the act was not a promotion of maximum emergency compensatory action for justice, but it was the maintenance of non-justice. So that is what happens when requirements for MECA are not applied correctly.
There's no way to know.
Also,
Because everybody that's involved in that is dead. There's no way to know if the person prayed about it or didn't pray about it, or if they were just upset, or if they had tried their whole life to get rid of the system of white supremacy and decided that there's nothing else that they could do except that. There's no way to know that. The non-white person has to kill themselves. So all you have afterwards is one or more white people that's dead and a non-white person that's dead. That's all you have. So, I mean, there's nobody to ask, you know, what the person's motivation was for doing it. Because the only person that knows what their motivation was for doing it is them.
That also got me thinking. I'm sorry if I cut you off, Mr. Edward.
I'm sorry?
Oh, did I cut you off?
No.
So, because I can't remember what page it was on, but he had mentioned like not leaving any kind of like materials. It says do not carry on 384, do not carry any written materials on your person while enacting maximum emergency compensatory action. And you know, the writings and stuff, you know, oftentimes some people leave like, I guess what you call manifestos. So do you think like maybe this is like Neely Fuller saying not to leave stuff like that behind. So you don't, not to leave anything like that behind. Because wouldn't those kind of be like explaining their motivation for doing what they did?
Yeah, that's the whole point. So the idea is to not leave. I talked to Mr. Fuller about that because after reading the first 84 edition,
There's a lot of feedback from your mic, Edward.
yeah, I was outside. Is it still feeding back?
It's a little better.
Okay. Yeah, I talked to Mr. Fuller about that, is what I was saying. After reading the 84 edition, 1984 edition of the code book, which doesn't state that you shouldn't leave any materials explaining your actions, why you did what, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't state that. So I had a conversation with him about actually having that, because in the 1984 edition, it says that you should, if you are going to commit that act, you should commit it in such a way that nobody else gets blamed. And there were other criteria as well. And we had a conversation about, and I suggested, well, maybe the person should just, write what they're going to do and how they're going to go about doing it. And Fuller was adamant about it. He said, no, that's not the way it works. You can't do that, because then it's not maximum emergency, because anybody could say a person committed the act and they didn't leave any materials. Anybody could come along and say, well, yeah, here's a handwritten note, of the killer. It's like, no. So you should not have any materials stating what you were going to do, why you were going to do it, when you were going to do it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All you have is a dead non-white person and one or more dead white people. That's all you have. So the criteria that he's pointing out about you should do this, you should pray about it, whatever the case may be, those are things that a person should do. But there's no way to know if that person did do that, any of those things, because the person is dead. So all you really have is a bunch of dead people. And people can go about, as they usually do, making assumptions about what happened and why it happened, things of that nature. Because people are going to do that anyway. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Yeah, it makes me think. Would it be more beneficial if the individual? I understand the idea that if it's done in a certain way, maybe it's done in such a way that nobody has to question or wonder what this was, or what the action was. But if the person who enacted it maybe said that I had to do this because of racism, white supremacy, that justice, I need to compensate for the lack of justice, and stuff like that. How people might receive that, or other victims. Would that maybe lead to less confusion for them? I don't know.
See, I thought the same thing. That's the reason I suggested it to Fuller, but he was very specific about not leaving anything. No notes, no nothing. No media posts, nothing.
Mm.
You know, absolutely nothing. And once he explained it, once he laid out the logic, you know, it made sense. You know, and another point that he brought up during that conversation is this is an emergency act. So it's not, you know, I'm gonna go on this killing spree over the span of 20 years. You know, that does not qualify. It is an emergency act that has to be done right away. Done in a way that nobody can assume that nobody else did it except for the people that are dead.
Hmm.
And see, that really takes some thought, you know, to plan something out like that in your head, because you can't write nothing down. You have to plan everything out in your head and then commit the act.
Mr. Ray, would you like to share?
Yes, I was just going to read the portion of the 1984 code that Mr. Williams was speaking about. And it says, don't carry any written materials on your person while enacting maximum emergency compensatory justice, except those counter-racist materials and or writings which are of practical value in helping to inspire willpower and or in helping to improve the efficiency of enactment.
Right.
And
So,
that is on my apologies, Mr. Williams.
No,
That
no,
is
no,
on
no,
page
no.
that's on page 211.
Right. But that's not, you know, that's materials that will help to motivate you to complete the act. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people that run around here killing people. They ain't killing themselves. I mean, that's what completes the act.
Correct.
You know, that's not a okay, this is why I did this. You know, blah 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 blah. You know, this person mistreated me, you know, on August 15th, you know, 2012. And that's the reason I killed them. They mistreated me based on color. See, you can't leave none of that kind of stuff. And some of that criteria is a very fine line. Because, you know, me and Fuller went back and forth on a lot of that stuff. And I encourage, you know, you guys to call him up and discuss the specifics with him. You know, and don't be afraid to go back and forth on it. You know, don't be afraid of that, because he won't be. You know, you may have something that is valid that he hasn't heard before.
Yeah, me personally, I think it would be constructive if some sort of message was left behind indicating that this was done due to compensate for the absence of justice, and more things like this should happen until a system of justice is produced. Something along those lines, I think, would be constructive. Because I don't see the constructive value in just dead people on the scene. You know, that it has to, the why needs to be added. The why needs to be there. So definitely don't agree with that aspect of code, but it's not my concept. So
Well, I mean, you can, you know, adopt parts of any part of the book, you know, and write your own. when I had the discussion with Mr. Fuller about the name of that act, and he was calling it maximum emergency compensatory justice. I mean, we were arguing on the phone, you know, and I wasn't far from his house. You know, we were on the phone arguing back and forth, and I'm telling him, no, killing people ain't justice. It just ain't. It can be revenge, but it ain't justice. And he's explaining why it is and whatnot, and then he finally said, you know what? I had written that concept before I had a detailed definition for the word justice. This is what he told me at the time he wrote the concept. His definition of justice was balance between people. That's all he had at the time. And so he said, I may need to upgrade that definition to a detailed definition. And we talked about different definitions, and he told me the one, you know, guaranteeing that no person is mistreated, guaranteeing that the person who needs help the most gets the most help. At that time, he didn't have gets the most constructive help. He just had gets the most help. And we talked about that and whatnot. He said, well, using this definition, you know, guaranteeing definition, he said, I agree that it's not justice. Because that definition does not involve killing people. And I said, well, you know, I was kind of taken aback that he would even agree to that, you know, after the arguments that we had about it, you know. And I said, well, I have 3 other names that you could call it. And when I told him about the maximum emergency compensatory action, he said, yeah, that's what it is, action. And he went with that term. So, I mean, please, when you're talking to him or any other person about any other concept or theory or whatever, if you feel, you know, justified in your position, stand your ground. Because nobody solved the problem before. I mean, we all could be wrong. You know, so stand your ground and talk about it and walk through the logic. And, you know, I doubt if, you know, and I don't feel good about saying this, but I doubt if Mr. Fuller has enough time left on the planet to write a 3rd edition, because that's a lot of writing. There's a lot of editing. That's a lot of work. You know, but he can write, you know, addendums to the 2016 version, if he so chooses, you know, to do that.
Well said.
Can I add something?
Please do.
One of the things that I thought about too with this concept is if there was something left behind, or like, as we're mentioning, like there's going to be nothing, like even if we just said like, oh, this has to be done because the lack of justice, whatever the words are, it's just the way the system is, they can just change that up and change the narrative and just provide more confusion for non-white people. But I think if this action goes step by step, as we know from Mr. Fuller's book, then we can put 2 to 2 together. Because as we're doing this discussion here, people are watching this discussion, understanding what MECA means, understanding what the steps are. So if we keep continuously spreading this, and then the actions happen, I feel like more people will be more aware, like, oh, that was MECA, or you know what I mean? I just feel like the more that's like left behind, or that's like given to white people is the more like confusion will be produced, because they don't want to say, like we said, for the lack of justice, they're going to change the whole narrative and create another monster and be like, oh, look at what non-white people are doing. So it's just very interesting that I think about these things. Even with media, we know how media is displayed and how it's just like the misrepresentation or even the images they put on non-white people, especially in situations where it's like, oh, someone killed someone or whatever it is. The narrative is always different. But when we see someone shooting up churches who's white or shooting up schools, oh, it's just a troubled little boy. He's just troubled. But it's just very interesting.
Yeah, and that's what that is what Fuller's whole point is, you know. As soon as you leave something, so, you know, the racist white supremacists will, I mean, I don't know if they can, you know, create hurricanes. You know, some people say that they can. I don't know. But, you know, just look at Katrina. You know, hurricane come through and they've figured out a way to mistreat non-white people as a result of that. Now, they, as far as I know, they didn't create the hurricane, so, but whatever comes along, that's an example of whatever comes along, whether it's a quote unquote natural disaster or not. To your point, they'll find a way to spin it. They're going to lie about it, cheat about it, everything else, in such a way that the result is it's going to look like it was non-white people's fault all the time, and that white people are innocent. They're really crafty with doing that. Real crafty.
Yeah, and I'm gonna read a definition from the word guide really quickly, because we must, you know, the importance of words. We must understand the importance of words, and I'm hearing the two words together quite often these days. The media, and this is from the word guide 228. It says the media. Do not use this term. Instead, say some people have said. Others use the term, ask for a detailed explanation that you can easily understand, and as if the term includes everything that any person says to any person about anything. No, according to compensatory logic, the media is, generally speaking, any person who buys, sells, or gives or receives information of any kind at any time. So I just like to say suspected racists, the system, white supremacy, because those are the creators of so-called media and controllers of media. And back to area 9, I think this part is insanely significant, and I would like help reading from 388 to 389 for folks who can follow along. I think it would be constructive to get this piece on the airwaves. So I'm gonna start and stops on 389, and if I can get some help and it being read by others, that would be very helpful. So 388, the code says, do not restrict the enactment of maximum emergency compensatory action only to those white people that you personally dislike. Enact maximum emergency compensatory action by executing any white person present who practices racism, white supremacy, including those whom you like or admire, as well as those whom you dislike or do not admire. Reason: A white supremacist racist is a white supremacist. A white supremacist is a person who willfully and deliberately practices injustice against people who are classified as non-white, and by doing so prevents the possibility of justice being established by any people, white or non-white, any place in the known universe.
A
A
white
white,
supre-
okay, go ahead.
no, ma'am. Go ahead. Go ahead.
A white supremacist is a person who prefers to promote falsehood rather than truth. A white supremacist is a person who prefers injustice rather than justice. A white supremacist is a person who prefers war rather than peace. A white supremacist is a person who prefers to deceive, belittle, seduce, and exploit a non-white person rather than do all that he or she can to help all persons to be perfectly constructive beings.
A white supremacist is a person who prefers to kill non-white people rather than see them evolve into people who effectively promote the revelation of truth and use the truth in a manner that promotes the establishment of justice and correctness. Many white supremacists are extremely intelligent. Many are very attractive and fascinating, arresting to the eye and pleasing to the ear. Many of them have such likable personalities that it is extremely difficult to believe that such people could be so completely dedicated to the practice of injustice. Many of them have such likable personalities that it is extremely difficult to believe that they are willing to use whatever deceit and violence is necessary to maintain the ability to take unjust advantage of the primitive conditions and or the stupidity or silliness of the large number of relatively pitiful non-white people of the known universe. Reminder, both the racist white supremacist and the victim of white supremacy, non-white person who enacts maximum emergency compensatory action cease to exist in the process. In a matter so serious, the likes and dislikes of people on the basis of personality, though desirable, may likely hinder the promotion of justice during a time when it is the last chance for a victim of racist injustice to do so.
Thank you, Miss Carice and Mr. Reed 1/0. Yeah, this is a very significant piece of code right here. The really important part involving the being able to overcome the hypnotizing effects of white people. I really appreciate his understanding of um, how seductive and charming white people have made themselves, and how they can have easily um, have easily kept non-white people confused and unaware of how dedicated white people are to practicing racism and maintaining it forever, it seems. So if a person attempts or chooses to apply Mecca, yeah, no white person is off the table, um, especially because that person may be likable or charming. If it is a suspected white supremacist or a confirmed white supremacist, then the elimination should be considered correct. Though their elimination should be considered correct. And
Well, I guess in that context, if you are white, you're right.
yeah. Are there folks who wanted to share the rest of their notes, comments before we get to closing comments? Because I've concluded my notes. All right.
052.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, I didn't get a chance to start that U.S. Army Guerrilla Warfare Manual yet, but when I do, I will report.
Understood. No worries. All right. Would anyone like to get us started in closing comments?
I can begin. Okay, so just closing out, I think this section here really solidified, I guess, like some of the questions that I had. Because at the beginning, as I mentioned prior, I just didn't really fully understand. I was like, what? But I think now actually going through this section, and really just thinking about it, like just thinking about it, even just thinking about like if this act was committed, and then also like materials being left behind, and also the whole killing of themselves, is just like, okay, so why is this all happening? But I think it just started to make sense now, so I'm glad I got to continue on with this section. And yeah, interested to continue on and also get the word guide. I think it's would be very useful to have. Thank you.
My closing comments is I agree with Nana. I'm definitely trying to get the word guide. But this section gives more detail as opposed to what rules are you gonna do when you carry out maximum MECA. So I would just think that as complicated it did sound, it seems very more in detail as to now I get why you want to leave or leave traces behind, because it doesn't matter what way, they're gonna always spin it the way they want to spin it. So it's best to do it the way that you're supposed to do it. But I just can't wait to continue on with this book. But this pages enlightened me more into detail.
For my closing comments, I would like to thank everyone for a constructive business meeting.
My closing comments, very constructive information this evening. And I know Mr. Fuller says that he put the 9 areas of activity in alphabetical order, but to me, it seems as if war is the final answer. It seems that we've exhausted ourselves in all the other 8 areas and still no justice. So those are my closing comments.
My closing comment is that I appreciate the detail, I mean, down to the weather that Neely Fuller put into this section of MECA, and very good business meeting.
For my closing comments, the information shared tonight I found it to be constructive. When understanding MECA, I understand that that MECA is an emergency action, so almost like a last resort, at least to me. There can be other ways. Just start practicing counter racism, and then if maybe you deem that that's not enough, then maybe an act such as MECA occurs. So that's it for my closing comment. Looking forward to the next discussion.
Yeah, I think this concept and this whole area, war/carnivore, makes a lot of sense, because it's been made quite evident to me that white people are waging a race war against non-white people, especially Black people. In all wars, killing will occur, death will occur. It's really constructive that Neely Fuller has presented us with a constructive and maybe even correct way to put the existence of others, put the existence of any of our enemies in our hands, and attempt to produce justice with maximum, with what could be called maximum effort by attempting Mecca. But definitely it makes a lot of sense. I'm reading this. I just wondered like what kind of you know, like I wonder if Neely Fuller was like getting messages from the creator when he was writing this portion of the text, because the information seems really profound, and I gotta use that word again, but powerful, to say the least. Mr. Edward Williams, would you like to share a check-in before we, I mean, my bad, a closing comment before we adjourn?
Just like to apologize for being so late to the meeting and to thank everyone for a constructive meeting.
Thank everyone for the time and energy and for the very constructive participation.